Episode 50, The Mad Butcher of Fayette County. Hey y'all, I'm Heather, and this is Poisoned Appalachia, the dark side of Appalachia. As always, thank you for listening. Last week's episode about Alabama, I learned a lot about Alabama. I mean, really, I was kind of interesting. I also found a possible news story while researching, but we'll have to wait and see about that one. Today, I want to talk about the Mad Butcher of Fayette County, sometimes called the Mad Butcher of West Virginia. This case is unsolved, and on the surface, I'm not even sure all these murders are related, but let's dive into it and find out the story. Between 1962 and 1964 in Fayette County, West Virginia, 7 men vanished. Although they were all assumed to have been deceased, only a few of their bodies were found, or parts of their bodies at least. I've done a story in Fayette County before, if you'll remember my podcast on the Sauter family. It was in Fayette County, and that was the one where all the children were killed in a fire on Christmas Eve. Or were kidnapped. Their parents thought they were kidnapped. Not good things in Fayette County, apparently. Fayette County is a county seat, and Fayette and Oak Hill, West Virginia, are mentioned in a lot in this episode. Fayette is right near the New River Gorge. That's probably its biggest draw today, but Fayette used to be a coal mining town. Wikipedia says Fayetteville grew rapidly in the late 19th century thanks mainly to the coal industry. The mining industry declined in the late 20th century. Fayetteville's economy now is almost completely based on the tourism industry. The period all this happened was really after the start of the declines of the coal mines, but before the tourism industry caught hold. So it was in the 1960s in Fayetteville, West Virginia, and it was a small town experiencing the beginnings of what would become a booming whitewater rafting industry. While the coal boom was still impacting the region, with towns and the gorge becoming ruins, a pivotal moment occurred in 1968 when John Dragon launched his first commercial rafting trip down the New River. This event laid the groundwork for Fayetteville's future as a popular tourist destination and whitewater hub. That's just to kind of give you an idea what the area was like at the time. So, as I previously said, these may not even be connected or anything, but I'm going to do it like they are, and then I'll discuss at the end what I think, or whatever the theories are. The first victim wasn't the first known victim, but his name was Bob McAgee. The disappearance of McAgee, though now thought to be the initial victim of the Mad Butcher, was not brought to the attention of authorities until July 1964. Confusion about whether or not Mac had returned to Chicago being the crux of the problem. McAgee was a native of Kingston, West Virginia, which is a tiny little unincorporated town in Fayette County. Mac had been living and going to school in Chicago at the time of his disappearance. He was training to be an electrician. February 1962, Mac came back to West Virginia to visit his ailing mother who was living in a nursing home. He was hitchhiking from the nursing home back to Kingston, but he never returned to Kingston. When he failed to return to the family home where he was staying, relatives assumed Bob had simply hitchhiked back to Chicago. Friends in Chicago assumed he stayed home and didn't plan on resuming his studies. After not hearing from him for a year, the family did try to contact Mac, and in 1965, it was reported by a relative of a co-worker that McAgee was alive and well in Chicago. Multiple news reports ran on the story, which ultimately proved to be false. Even the state police filed a report about it. Finally, the family contacted the state police to report McAgee missing. There's not a lot to be known about Mac's disappearance, which may have to do with the fact that it was several years before an investigation into his disappearance could be conducted. So no one really knows what happened to Mac, or if he's even connected to the other murders, but as a whole, it would seem like he could definitely be one of the people murdered. The next person is the first victim that was reported as missing, and his name was Ernest Gwynn. Ernest Gwynn was born June 29, 1887 in Somers, West Virginia. He married Mary Josephine Nichols on July 1st, 1912, when he was 25 years old. The pair shared 2 children, Bernice and Nicholas Gwynn. Ernest had retired from the railroad, which, as I've mentioned in other episodes, the railroad was a vital employer for people in Appalachia. If they weren't miners, they were probably on the rails. He had retired from his work as a brakeman for the railroad. His wife died in 1950, so at the same time as his disappearance, he was a widower who was living at a boarding house or hotel. He lived in the Virginian Hotel on Main Street in Oak Hill and lived a simple life, but life was very structured. He did the same thing almost every day at the same time. On the evening of July 3rd, 1962, Ernest cashed his pension check, promptly paying his rent for the month, and then he went to the 4-minute lunch where he would always take his meals. Ernest conversed with many of the patrons, drank several beers, and left the establishment for the evening. It's not known the exact time of the departure, but according to witnesses, Ernest was seen greeting several acquaintances on his way home. When he failed to show up to dinner the next day, the owner, who was also Ernest's landlord, asked a worker to go up to his apartment and complete some painting and repairs that were needed. The landlord just thought that Ernest had gone out of town to visit his family because it was the holiday around the July 4th. And he thought it would be a nice surprise for Ernest when he returned that his room would be painted up. But Ernest Gwynn never returned home. On July 6, 1962, his sons were made aware of their father's absence, and not having had contact with him either, they contacted the state police to report him missing. The state police started investigating. Several witness statements have claimed that after leaving the 4-minute lunch, Ernest patronized the Veterans Foreign Affairs Club. Here he was seen in the company of 3 men, though later on it was disputed by the proprietor of the club that Ernest Gwynn had even been there on the evening of July 3rd. The police still thought the 3 men may be involved. They were Paul Tiger of Fayetteville, Bill Douglas of Oak Hill, and Louis Starson of Minden. They thought these men knew that Ernest had been paid and they robbed him. They had previously been charged for the kidnapping of a George Hess, who I couldn't find really anything about, but they were a good scapegoat for this case. I really couldn't find anything else about these 3 men, or really anything. So really there's not a lot I can go further with that part, but at first they were thought to have been involved. There would be no sign of Ernest Gwynn or clues as to his fate for almost a year. In May of 1963, a skull with a bullet hole was located by railroad workers that was believed to be Ernest Gwynn. Though it's difficult to determine age based on the lack of remains, the time of death was approximated to have been 10 months prior, around the time of Gwynn's disappearance. Similar to the skull, Gwynn had many teeth extracted prior to his disappearance, but it was not able to be officially confirmed because Gwynn's dentist had destroyed the records before an identification could be positively made. Ernest Gwynn was a man of small stature and stood only 5'9" and weighed around 170 pounds, so the remains fit Ernest's description. The next victim is Sammy Smith, who disappeared October 20th, 1962. Sammy was 33 years old at the time of his disappearance with black hair and hazel eyes. He was estimated to have been around 5'8". Sammy Smith was a migrant farm worker from Scarborough, West Virginia. He'd been working on a farm in Connecticut and had recently returned to the Mountain State at the conclusion of the season and took up a position as a dishwasher at the 4-minute lunch in Oak Hill. On the evening of his disappearance, Sammy completed his shift at the 4-minute lunch around 12 a.m. After that, Sammy was seen at the Top Hat Drive-In because he was witnessed shortly after his shift getting a cup of coffee from the establishment. It was assumed that he had hitchhiked to the Top Hat Drive-In. The last sighting of Sammy came from a fellow customer at the drive-in around 12:20 who claimed to have seen him walking towards his home in Scarborough after leaving the drive-in. Sammy was walking through a dirt road that he may have used for a shortcut. It was reported he was carrying a large amount of money. His disappearance wasn't reported for 2 weeks. Sammy's body was never found. Michael Rogers was murdered December 19th, 1962, and this one is really sad to me. It wasn't until the murder of Mike Rogers in December of 1962 that people started getting scared. This is when the tales of the Mad Butcher started. Mike Rogers was a 19-year-old mentally handicapped ward of the state. He lived on Salem Road with his foster parents, the Dilleys, and they'd taken care of him since the age of 3. So, I mean, really, they were his parents. About 5 p.m. on December 19th, Mike told his foster mother that he was going to go to Salem Market to pick up some cigarettes and look at the Christmas lights. That breaks my heart and makes me want to almost cry. Poor gentle soul. He told her that if the market was closed, he'd walk on to Oak Hill for the cigarettes and return home after. Mike was witnessed on Main Street in Oak Hill around 6 p.m. in the passenger side of a station wagon with Ohio tags. Mike often hitchhiked, so this wasn't uncommon at all. It was a common sight. We hear a lot about hitchhiking in this story, but it wasn't uncommon at the time. Everyone kind of did it. People didn't have cars at the time that much in this area. The last sighting of Mike occurred around 6:30 p.m., according to a friend. Mike approached his vehicle and asked for a ride home. He appeared to be in a hurry to get home and perhaps frightened. He told Mike he would return for him in about 30 minutes and agreed to give him a ride if he still needed one, but Mike would be gone when he returned. He was last spotted on the east end of Oak Hill, near the entrance of Salem Road. The Dillies reported Mike missing to the state police right away, but there was no sign of him at all until December 27, 1962, 8 days after his disappearance. It would be on this date that 11-year-old Billy Priest would stumble upon the dismembered remains of Mike Rogers while looking for pop bottles on Golly Mountain. Mike was completely naked and his body was dismembered into 13 pieces, with the head to have been found inside a plastic bag. A military duffel bag was also found on the scene containing the left section of Mike's torso and rump. Several organs were also present in the duffel bag. An autopsy revealed the remains appear to have been chopped and chewed. He had been killed before being dismembered. The cause of death was a gunshot in the back of the head with a 22mm firearm. The duffel bag had the name J.L. Howard on it. Authorities tracked this person down, but he said he lost the bag back in 1969 when he was traveling from Michigan to South Carolina. This is the one that set people off into panic. Now they were seeing a possible pattern. Everyone around Oak Hill knew Mike. He wouldn't hurt anyone. If this could happen to him, that could happen to anybody else. The next one's definitely questionable, but I'll present it like the others and we can discuss it later. On the evening of July 27, 1963, Louis Bennett left his residence on foot and to visit some friends around 5 p.m. Lou didn't quite fit the profile of the others. He was employed at the time. Lou is a 42-year-old coal mining operator at the World War II veteran from Oak Hill, West Virginia. He went to the 4-minute lunch where he drank a beer and chatted at the counter. This place is a common denominator for a lot of these, but I just think it was more the fact that it was one of the few places in Oak Hill to go, not that it had anything to do with anything. While he was there, he was talking to an unknown female. He seemed depressed and told her he had been diagnosed with a fatal illness and didn't have long to live. He was said to have stated that he planned to simply disappear where no one would see him again. He bought her a couple of beers and left. Lou purchased a 6-pack of beer to go and left the 4-minute lunch, presumably headed home. He was witnessed by a local resident to have been walking down the railroad tracks, beer under his arm, en route towards his home, but Lou never arrived home. Lou's wife reported him missing to the West Virginia State Police the next morning, as it was extremely uncommon for him not to return home. Lou had recently been diagnosed with a fatal ailment regarding the kidneys, but it's not confirmed what. And since then he'd been plagued with depression, and suicide was definitely not ruled out. He was never seen again, and his body wasn't found until May 19, 1965, when a group of children playing near the railroad tracks between Minden and Thurman, West Virginia, found a human skull. When police were called to the scene, they found remains located down a ravine as well as some other items. They found a battery, a detonation cable, and articles of clothing, including a unique belt with the letter B inscribed. Relatives of Bennett confirmed the articles belonged to Lou, and it was ultimately confirmed that the remains were his. Maybe Lou just killed himself, but his family thinks otherwise. Probably by this point, no one will ever really know what happened to Lou. Shirley Arthur is next. He disappeared, or was murdered, perhaps, on November 22, 1963. Many history buffs will know this date was an important date. That's the day that JFK was assassinated. It had been almost 4 months since the last person went missing, but on November 22nd, 1963, Shirley Jean Arthur was seen alive for the last time. On that day, Shirley was visiting his girlfriend and her family in Sophia, West Virginia. About 11 p.m., he left their home to hitchhike back to his home in Bradley, West Virginia. He never returned home. The last confirmed sighting of Shirley Arthur was at 2 a.m. in the small community of Sophia, West Virginia, before his departure. His girlfriend gave him a yellow apple as a snack for the trek home. While Shirley didn't arrive home, his family wasn't immediately alarmed. It wasn't out of Shirley's nature to take off and return at random times. His disappearance wasn't reported until December 8th. A little bit about Shirley is that he had recently gone AWOL from the duties in the Navy, returning home to West Virginia to sort through some personal issues. Shirley was a talented gospel singer and had aspirations of making it big in the musical arena. So basically, he was kind of a bit of a flake, so the family wasn't too worried, and with everything going on with the JFK assassination, Shirley was just kind of forgotten about. The only reason it was even reported then was because a body was found in the woods down near Indian Creek. The torso of a Caucasian male was discovered by 3 teenagers looking for firewood. About 20 feet from the main road, wrapped in a canvas tarp, were the dismembered lower extremities of a body. There was no head or limbs found with the torso. It was just a torso. The coroner thought that the body had been dumped a couple days earlier. An autopsy revealed 19 stab wounds into the chest, any of which could have been fatal, that had been made with a blunt instrument such as an ice pick. The body also showed signs of being held in cold storage, and it was notably still thawing at the time of the discovery. The lungs of the victim appeared clean, revealing that our victim was not a coal miner nor a smoker. The contents of the stomach showed 2 cups of partially digested food, including the remains of a yellow apple. His family went to identify the remains. Shirley's mother and ex-wife positively identified him, but his brother did not. However, since everything else fit, he wasn't a miner and he had remains of an apple, which is the last thing he ate when he left his girlfriend's house, authorities came to the conclusion that the body was probably that of Shirley Jean Arthur. There's one detail that could definitely prove otherwise, though. Shirley Jean Arthur was a known heavy smoker, and the lungs of the victim were clean. To this day, the torso has never been properly identified and is buried in Wyoming County Cemetery, bearing an inscription, Mr. X. Alright, so this next one is another really iffy one, that he's a victim of the Mad Butcher or not, but I'll include him anyways, because he's included in all these lists. On the same day that the torso could possibly have been Shirley Arthur was discovered, another person mysteriously disappeared. Sergeant James Lee Haynes had hitchhiked down from Baltimore, Maryland to visit his family in Mabin, West Virginia, after returning home from a tour abroad. He planned on catching a ride back to Maryland with a family member, but he never arrived. The family quickly notified the authorities of Haynes' disappearance and requested an alert be sent via television and radio. Immediately, a woman from Powelltown responded to the state police to identify Haynes as the passenger she gave a ride to from Baltimore. According to her account, she dropped him off at the intersection of Route 21 and West Virginia 61 before proceeding home. And that's right near Oak Hill. And honestly, just this one woman's account is the only thing that ties him to this area in this case. There's also another story connected to him that's probably more likely. While in Raleigh County, James had went into an unnamed local tavern just looking for a couple of drinks. He ended up getting into a fight with 3 men. After the fight, James left the tavern to continue his journey to Salisville. The 3 men from the bar followed James and ran him down with their vehicle. Unsure if he was dead, they backed over him and ran over him again. Then they loaded his body into the trunk and drove over the Wyoming County line. They purportedly buried his body somewhere near Bolt Mountain. A search of the area led the authorities to find the dog tags nailed to a tree and his wallet, along with several bloodied rags stuffed in a hollow tree stump, but they never found the body. Although his family confirmed the items did not belong to Haynes, so who knows? And then, later on, I read that that the dog tags that were found was just a chain, so I really don't know. The Army officially declared James Lee Haynes dead in May of 1965, and he was memorialized on May 31st, 1965. His remains have never been located. So honestly, there's no actual proof he was even in the area for that one, so I just think that one's a big stretch. There was an article in the Cumberland Evening Times on Thursday, August 20th, 1964, that said, Mad Butcher Stalks Oak Hill, West Virginia Streets by James D. Davies. And in this article, he said, fear stalks the streets of the southern West Virginia community. The townspeople are sure a murderer, a mad butcher, walks among them. 7 men from the area have disappeared during the past 2 years. Only one has been located. The dismembered body of Mike Rogers of Oak Hill has been found on Gauley Mountain on December 27, 1962. A skull was found about 15 miles east of there in 1963. The canvas-wrapped torso of a decapitated man was found in December 1963 near Pineville, Wyoming County, and about 40 miles to the southeast. Authorities have failed to make positive identification. So, that's from the newspaper article. All of these men were alone when last seen, and at least 4 of them were seen hitchhiking, which was a major mode of transportation in the coal mining region. Other than that, I mean, there's really nothing that kind of connects them together, I don't think. So what do you think? Was there a Mad Butcher? Were any or all of these connected? Like many other cases, unless the Mad Butcher confesses, I guess no one will really ever know for sure. I'm honestly not convinced that there was a serial killer. I think a couple of murders could be connected, but definitely not all of them. Of course, I'm no expert, and this is all just me guessing, but that's how I feel. So let's kind of just go over it again. McAgee, I don't think he was killed by the Mad Butcher. I don't even know if he was killed. I would say most likely he was, but there's a conflict about whether he returned to Chicago or not, so who really knows? He could have been killed in Chicago. I think if he was alive, though, he definitely would have popped up somewhere between then and now, but I don't think he was a victim of the Mad Butcher. Ernest Gwynn. So the thing with all these cases, if they had occurred around today's times, we probably would have a lot more conclusive evidence about things, but, back then, they could only do the best they could do. We know Ernest was killed. They found his head with a gunshot in it. But there was a rumor that the three guys that possibly did it, and most likely if it was Ernest that was killed, it was probably these guys. But we don't even know 100% that it was Ernest that was found, so this one's probably unlikely that he was a victim of the Mad Butcher, but I wouldn't totally rule it out. Sammy Smith, his body was never found, so really no one even knows if he was murdered, or if he just wandered off into the night and possibly got eaten by a bear or something. Who really knows? So I doubt this one was a Mad Butcher. Michael Rogers, we know for sure that he was murdered, without a doubt. And if there was a Mad Butcher, I feel like this would likely be a victim of his, as the body was chopped up into 13 pieces. Something was definitely wrong with whoever killed this poor boy. Lou Bennett was the one that was found with a skull, a detonation device, and a battery. Lou Bennett was the one that was found with the skull, a detonation device, and a battery. He was depressed. He said he was dying. I think he just went down the railroad track and off the path a little bit and blew himself up. I don't think this was a Mad Butcher. I think it was a suicide. Shirley Arthur. This one could be the Mad Butcher, or at least connected to the same person who killed Michael Rogers. They were both dismembered and both were discarded. And even though we don't know that the victim was Shirley Arthur for sure, this victim definitely feels like it was connected to the same murderer. James Lee Haynes. I absolutely feel that this one has nothing to do with the others. There isn't even any proof that he was in the area at the time other than the woman that said she dropped him off. I think this guy was murdered and dumped in another county, and it was the three guys that he had fought with, and not the Mad Butcher. These are all a stretch to think they were done by the same person, and while it can't be ruled out without a doubt, I guess, I seriously don't think many of them were connected. Yes, they were all hitchhiking, but people did that all the time back then. A couple were connected to the 4-Minute Lunch diner, but not all of them. Maybe the Mad Butcher worked there. I don't think so, but you never know. They were almost all in Fayette County, but that's the only connections, really. We don't even know if they were all murdered, even. I think this whole case is a huge stretch to think a serial killer did it. But like I said, I guess we'll never know. The thing with serial killers is sometimes they're so mysterious you'll never know about them. Why did they start killing and why did they stop? If this is a serial killer, why did he only do it for 2 years? What stopped the spree, and why have we never heard anything from it again? One thing for certain, Fayette County has seen a lot of sadness over the years. The Sutter children's loss, all of these men that were found or not found murdered, all the coal mining deaths, all the silicosis deaths. There's just a lot of sorrow and sadness there. So because this episode is a little short, and I've talked about Fayette County before and things to do, I thought maybe I would just mention the New River Gorge for a minute. The New River Gorge has a rich history spanning from geological formations to human settlement and industrial development. It's one of the oldest rivers in North America, with its formation dating back to the breakup of Pangaea millions of years ago. Even though it's called the New River is one of the 5 oldest rivers in the world. The gorge itself was carved by the river's erosive power, creating a dramatic landscape with steep cliffs and deep canyons. Native Americans inhabited the area for centuries, utilizing the resources of the gorge. The arrival of European settlers led to the development of coal mining and logging industries, transforming the region and leaving behind remnants of boomtowns and mining operations. The New River Gorge National Park and Preserve is a United States national park and reserve designed to protect and maintain the New River Gorge in West Virginia in the Appalachian Mountains. Established in 1978 as a national river and redesignated in 2020, the park has and preserve stretches 53 miles from just downstream of Hinton to Hawks Nest State Park near Ansted. The park is rich in cultural and natural history and offers an abundance of scenic and recreational activities. New River Gorge has some of the country's best whitewater rafting, mainly from the Cunard Put-In to the Fayette Station takeout, and it's one of the most popular climbing areas in the East Coast. The New River itself originates from North Carolina, flowing north through Virginia into the West Virginia mountains to the Kanawha River, which continues to the Ohio River. Flowing water is the creative force shaping the geological features of the New River Gorge as the river continues to sculpt the longest and deepest river gorge in the Appalachian Mountains. On display at the gorge, a variety of unique geological features and processes exemplify the geology of the Appalachian Plateau, including the exposure of over 1,000 feet of sandstone and shale, house-shaped boulders scattered from the rim to rim, plant and invertebrate fossils, and steep channel drop-offs. The river has exposed 4 seams of coal, considered among the best bituminous coal in the world. The smokeless New River coal once fed the boilers of the nation's trains, factories, fleets, and power plants, and its coke fueled the nation's iron furnaces. There are historically significant abandoned places, some in ruins and some are stabilized and rehabilitated, where people worked and lived during the late 18th and 19th centuries, supplying the coal from the New River coalfield and lumber that helped fuel American industry. Remnants of the park's past, hidden in the forest, tell stories of an earlier life in the Appalachian Mountains. On display are tangible remains of historic coal mining structures and coke ovens, such as the Natalburg Mining Complex and Town Historic District and K. Moore, and the historic structures and ruins associated with more than 50 owned company coal towns. The New River Gorge region was opened up to the outside world in 1873 with the coming of the railroad. In the park there was an old railroad depots, rail yards, rail grades, steel and timber trestle bridges, railroad equipment, and archaeological sites in associated towns like Thurman that were developed to support the railroad. The history associated with the lumbering industry can be seen in the ruins of old towns like Hamlet. Also contributing to the area's cultural history are surviving examples of subsistence farms, former community sites, homesteads, and other places in the park where the ancestors and families long associated with the New River lived and worked. So that's just a little bit about the New River Gorge. If you're in the area, definitely check it out. It's a beautiful place. And make sure you go across the bridge while you're at it. I guess that's about it for today's episode. Hope you enjoyed it. As always, thank you for listening. You can follow me on social media under Poison Appalachia. I'm on Instagram, Facebook, Threads, Lemonade, TikTok, Blue Sky, and YouTube. And if you could, on the podcast platform that you listen to, could you please like and rate me and share me, please? Let's get the word out about this podcast. Thanks, y'all, and have a great day.